to the postseason.
Connor giving away one of his wildcard picks in June ahead of our season preview show later in the summer. We'll close out with the AFC champions, the Super Bowl champions. You go to some sporting events, Colin, over the course of your time, whether it's football, whether it's Gaelic sports, whatever, and you walk away from games and you say, that really truly was a fabulous event to be at, because you get to see a player with the qualities of Patrick Mahomes and what we saw from him in the Super Bowl. He goes in at halftime, 10 points down, looks like he's carrying that injury again, yet he finds a way to come back. And you've always said, and I think last year when we were doing our season preview, I don't think everybody picked the Chiefs to win the division at the time, and you said should never count against a team that has Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Like, I think the opening question has to be, are they going to run it back? Because come September, the general consensus will be they're going to be up there. They're going to be looking against the Bengals, the Chargers, and all these various different teams within the AFC. But the reality is, come January next season, we would expect again to see the Chiefs certainly in the running, if not in the AFC Championship game, to be coming back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I would expect them to be there, or I think they're thereabouts, right? Because for me, you have Andy Reid, you have Patrick Mahomes, okay? You have I believe, the best head coach in the game, and you have the best quarterback in the game. And those are the two most important things you could possibly have. Now, the others are, that's not to say there aren't other extremely talented head coaches and quarterbacks. Of course there are. And there will be questions, right? Word today, as we're recording this, that Chris Jones may well sit out at least this mandatory mini camp because he wants to get the contract done. The Frank Clark has obviously signed for the Broncos. To me, I get why the Chiefs have moved off them. They used the first round pick this year on an edge. Karl Aftis came in last year. You have to make room for those guys to grow. Will they grow into it? That's to be seen. And Frank Clark did make a difference for them in the playoffs last year. But I understand them making the decision that they're making. For them, the enemy has obviously moved on, and we talked about that when we talked about Washington. But it always kind of felt, and we know that Matt Derrick has talked about this, Brian, from Chiefs Digest, that Nagy was, and Conor can show you there'll be a wry smile, but Andy Reid has a very soft spot for Matt Nagy. And Nagy was always in, or at least the thinking amongst maybe the Chiefs media is that Matt Nagy was always considered the heir apparent. Now, I imagine the Hunt family may have looked at what happened in Chicago and may have question marks. But for the Chiefs, I can't. It's difficult for me to imagine that they will miss a beat with the enemy moving on, because Nagy knows Mahomes. He's been there, done that. He's back in the fold. So yeah, there are question marks. There are questions on the defense, and particularly like last year, Chris Jones was immense, right? They went away from the nonsense that they had done the year before, where they tried playing him outside. They played him through the middle. He played the entirety of the season, and he's a wrecking ball. Last year he was, because of Aaron Donald's injury and just the season that the Rams had, he was the most destructive defensive tackle in the league. But the thing is, they probably need him to have another season like that. So they need to get this contract situation sorted out. You have Mahomes, you have Andy Reid, and even though they lost the tackles, they replaced them with two solid tackles, and their interior on the O-line is so good as well. I don't see who do you put above them? How do you put anyone above them? At least as we sit here in June.
Connor, Colin slightly killed my thunder on my question, but I was just going to touch on the point that Wiley left the offensive line, the offensive tackle left in free agency to go to Washington. They lose Orlando Brown to Cincinnati, essentially one of their key rivals. They bring in Jawan Taylor from the Jags, and Colin's touched on there. Like we saw a couple of years ago when they lost the Super Bowl to the Bucs, how quickly in that free agency they recognized we need to transition, we need to rebuild this offensive line. I wouldn't go as far as to say that's what they're doing now, but they just seem to be methodically be able to change the offensive lineup, and instill very ill effects in terms of what Mahomes can do with the players around them.
Yeah, and look, they had to play with Mahomes broken up for the back half of the playoffs as well. So, you know, at full power, it's an even scarier prospect, and we sometimes kind of tend to forget that he was so banged up over the Super Bowl and the latter half of the championship game. And with all of that said, I mean, you really do need the break of the ball, even if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, they could easily have lost that championship game to the Bengals, and maybe some questionable officiating helps them on their way there. I know the Chiefs are the subject of 1,000 internet conspiracy theories now. I don't even want to go near that. I mean, they won the game fair and square. I don't think there's any two ways about that, but it could easily have gone the other way. It's very tight. You know, that roughing the passer call, you know, terrible decision on the Cincinnati side, helped them over the line there. You know, it's those small margins that do make a massive difference, and the holding call in the Super Bowl as well. So for as good as they are, I wouldn't say it's impossible to look past them, because every team needs the rub of the green on the way to winning a Super Bowl. I think it's interesting looking at the other departures, right? So that, I mean, they're pretty confident in the wide receiver room they've got there. They obviously would expect Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney to continue stepping up, because they've lost McCall Hardman. They let Juju Smith-Schuster go as well, but you know, they're hardly poorly set on that side in terms of what they have. The Chris Jones situation is interesting, and you know, they'll want to resolve that sooner rather than later. I mean, he's not the only person to hold out from OTAs and with the contract situation hanging over his head, so it's certainly not going to derail the train. But coming out of the AFC is no joke. I mean, the division itself is not to be underestimated, and you know, I'm not sure I'd necessarily be installing them as runaway favorites. You know, I actually, not that I find it easy to look past them, but I find it easy to see how they might not have come out on top last year, and as a result, then projecting forward, I don't think they're any weaker than they were in a season in which they won the Super Bowl, but I don't think they're any stronger necessarily either. And you know, if you stay still, that's a dangerous place to be in the NFL.
Be interesting to see what comes of the secondary, bearing in mind how young that secondary was last year with the number of rookies that came in over the course of the season. Steve Spagnuolo did a great job defensively. Yeah, look, they opened the season Super Bowl champions against the Lions on that Thursday night. It'll be interesting to see how they get off to a fast start, if they get off to a fast start, and how they compete against a Lions team that a lot is expected of as well. That is our AFC West recap. In our next episode, we're going to focus on a team that could potentially challenge them to go to the Super Bowl, and that is the Bengals and the AFC North. But for now, Colin, appreciate your time. Thank you.